Hi, I'm Mark Brumley, and welcome to the Ignatius Press podcast. Today, our podcast is being taken over by Carl Olson from Catholic World Report. Carl and I haven't had a conversation in a while, and I thought it'd be great for us to have a CWR discussion. Carl, welcome.
Thanks, Mark. Yeah, it's good to keep track of your employees from time to time. So I'm glad that we could have this conversation.
We're keeping track of you. What's going on, man?
Well, there's obviously a lot happening. It's been fascinating to me to see the shift in the news. Obviously, the news in Ukraine is huge, and obviously it needs to be covered. And it's a global situation that's affecting the lives of a lot of people. But it's kind of interesting to me how quickly we've suddenly transitioned, at least from my perspective, from COVID. Suddenly now there was that emphasis for a little while on what was going on in Canada and some of these things, and then all of a sudden, these things drop off the news. And I as an editor of a news journal, it's fascinating to me how these things kind of shift and move like that. But the situation in Ukraine, I want to talk about that a little bit. As you know, and probably some listeners know, my wife and I and our family have been in a Ukrainian Catholic parish for over 20 years, since the late 1990s. And so a lot of this is hit very close to home. We have a number of people in our parish who have friends, not sure about family, but certainly friends in Ukraine. And it's been, a pretty emotional time for a lot of people, very difficult, especially with things shifting so quickly, right, almost on an hour-to-hour basis, not knowing what's going on with war, people getting killed. So that's first and foremost, on my mind. These really tragic and difficult situations that put some things in perspective for us, especially here in the United States.
Well, given the nature of what's going on in Ukraine, it is the case that anything we say here will be, out of date very quickly. I mean, it's a very volatile situation. But one thing we're confident of, we can continue to pray for the people of Ukraine, because they're going to need prayers for quite some time, regardless of how things unfold in the next few days or the next few weeks or even the next few months. So when people may be listening to this, they may be, situation may be well beyond where it is today. So you mentioned Ukrainian Catholics. I think a lot of people think of Ukraine as a country where Christianity is Orthodox, it's Orthodoxy. And you talked about Ukrainian Catholics. So what?
Yeah, and the dominant, certainly that is the dominant religion, body of believers in Ukraine. And I don't know the exact percentage. I do know that Catholics, between Eastern Catholics and Western Rite Catholics, they make up about 10% of the Ukrainian population. And from what I understand, though, that 10% has a really significant influence in Ukraine, probably disproportionate even to that percentage, for various reasons. And I don't pretend here to have a really inside knowledge of all those complexities. My pastor was over in Ukraine about 2 years ago. It's actually not long. Must have been over 2.5 years ago, before the COVID. But he was there for about a month. And he said one thing that really struck him in being in Ukraine was just how overtly religious society was in many ways. Now, he wasn't in any way saying that things were perfect. I mean, I think we know by now that Ukraine, like every country, but Ukraine has had a lot of problems with corruption and political instability, and it's a very complex history. But he said he was really struck by just the presence of the Catholic Church in Ukraine. A lot of things going on, a lot of robust activity in churches and in other institutions, whether it be schools or other things. So he said it was very, very different from being here in Western Oregon, where public religious signs are not very evident, obviously. But yeah, predominantly Ukraine is Orthodox, but of course, as you all know, and many of our listeners here know, it's a very complicated situation because you have different factions of Orthodox, and now it's even more complicated because this war has caused further splits, and now you have certain Orthodox groups condemning other Orthodox groups, and it's really won't try to untangle that here, but I think one of the most fascinating elements, stepping back, it is this religious aspect, which is significant. We have a couple pieces, Catholic World Report, recent pieces on this. George Weichel wrote a great piece, and Catholic News Agency, who we run a lot of their news briefs, had a very good piece there about how the Ukraine conflict is reshaping relations between these churches. So I think that's something that I've been trying to keep in mind and follow as best I can. Again, the history is just, we're not talking about a few decades of political history. I mean, just the last 3 or 4 decades of history in Ukraine is, you'd have to be, full-time specialist, but we're talking about centuries, right? So it's a really fascinating aspect.
Just for a little bit of context, and I know this seems obvious to some of us because we move in this world all the time. So, the expression inside baseball, a lot of this, although we're not experts, at least I'm not, when it comes to Ukraine or Orthodoxy or even Eastern Catholicism, we do move in this world, and for a lot of people, a lot of Catholics, even the sort of rudimentary knowledge base that we have for moving in this world, they don't necessarily share. So I'm going to say something that may seem to some listeners like, well, why are you even talking about such a basic thing as that? But for other listeners, it will be helpful. Just situate for us, Carl, when we talk about Orthodox Christianity and Catholic Christianity, and then even within Catholic Christianity, we talk about Eastern Catholicism. What are those distinctions that are being made there?
Well, historically, we go back 1,000 years, and there's kind of that convenient date of 1054. But I think in different parts of the world, it unraveled, or it kind of unrolled, so to speak, in different ways. A couple of things that might be of interest that people don't know is that the Ukrainian Catholic Church is the largest of the Eastern Catholic churches, which are many. There's 20 some different rites, but even that's kind of debated as far as how that's all broken up and so forth. But really the big issue has to do with authority and recognizing Rome and the Petrine office. That, of course, is distinctly Catholic, and both Eastern and Western Catholics adhere to that and see the Pope as the head apostle, or the head successor of the head apostle Peter, etc. Whereas in Orthodoxy, you have a really wide range of attitudes towards that. I think it's fair to say. I think this is accurate, where you have among some Orthodox a very anti-papal approach, a very anti-Catholic approach, whereas with some Orthodox, it's very, very different. It's very open to an ecumenical discussion with Catholics, and there's, I've really experienced a wide range of this in my various conversations, dealings with various Orthodox, everything from, papists are the Antichrist, or to, which is more of almost a Protestant fundamentalist approach. You see this attitude among some Orthodox, and then many Orthodox are just incredibly positively Catholic, and very, in fact, I've talked to many over the years who are very, not just appreciative, but really long for unity, which of course we should in the proper sense, and keeping with Christ's great prayer for unity. So that makes it even more complicated too. And I think the last thing I would say about this is, one of the big problems over the decades and centuries is that the Russian Orthodox Church is, the largest of the Orthodox churches, I think easily in terms of population, and I think also in terms of influence. And it tends to be very opposed to the Catholic Church on a lot of different levels, right? Both theologically, politically, etc. So that makes things very, very difficult, and has for a long time. So that's a little bit.
I was just say, without trash talking,
right,
Russian Orthodoxy, I mean, it is the case that institutionally the Russian Orthodox Church has, in many ways, been subordinated to the state. Obviously under the Soviet Union, when Christianity was outlawed is a oversimplification, but basically suppressed by law. And then even post fall of the Soviet Union, it is the case that there is a very close relationship between the Russian Orthodox Church in Russia and the government. So people may say, well, if Christianity was outlawed, why was there an Orthodox Church? And outlawed is a little bit, as I say, oversimplification, but it's certainly the case that that the communist government of the Soviet Union saw religion as a negative thing, as a threat, and so on. So, to the extent that Russian Orthodoxy was allowed at all, it was instrumentalized by the state. Would you say that that's accurate?
Yeah, I think that is accurate from what I know. Again, I'm not an expert on this topic either. I would, to point to the complexity of this. For example, I was sent a link a couple of days ago to a site where you have an appeal of the clergy of the Russian Orthodox Church for reconciliation and ending the war. So within Russian Orthodoxy right now, you have a number of priests, and I don't know if we have I have a number here. There's a great number. I think it's well over 100, maybe 150 different priests, archpriests, etc., who have signed this. They don't want Russia in this war. They don't want this attack on Ukraine. But then obviously you see Putin has the support of key Russian Orthodox leaders and members. So, I think the thing I would emphasize, and I think you touched on, Mark, is we shouldn't have a monolithic view of this. I would use the parallel of when I hear people talk about, American Protestantism. Right. Okay, what are we talking about? Now, obviously there are some differences. That's not an exact parallel. You're going to find certainly a lot more of a unity or similarity across the board within, say, Russian Orthodoxy than you are within American Protestantism. But I think I use that kind of as an example because I think we want to avoid, painting with a broad brush, but also to point out that there have been these tensions, and you do have a really interesting range of attitudes among Orthodox, not just Russian, towards the Eastern Catholic churches. I mean, historically, it was one of a lot of antagonism. But I think it has, in many places, has improved a great deal, thankfully. So that's going to be something that will just continue to go on for a long time outside of God, miraculously changing, I think, which is going to take.
Well, people are interested in understanding more about Catholicism and Eastern Orthodoxy and the history involved. I would encourage you to pick up a book by Father Aidan Nichols, English Dominican, called Rome and the Eastern Churches, published by Ignatius Press. You can get that, Rome and the Eastern Churches. So there's more of a discussion of that. Yes, and I certainly don't want to oversimplify and put everybody who falls in the category of Russian Orthodox in the same camp and say they're all on board with the politicalization of Christianity. So that would be unfair. Well, Carl, you've given us a good sampling of what's going on with CWR with respect to the topic of Ukraine and the Russian invasion of the Ukraine. What else is happening at CWR these days?
Well, like all the other Catholics in the world, we're going through Lent, and so we have some really good pieces on Lent. We've got a piece up here on the first of a series on Lent and the Sacraments by Father Peter Stravinskas, where he's going to go through each of the sacraments and discuss them in terms of Lent specifically. And then have an interesting little piece from today by Father Charles Fox, who's at Sacred Heart Seminary in Detroit, on praying the Liturgy of the Hours during Lent. So he gives kind of an encouraging push to people to consider taking up the Liturgy of the Hours or the office and consider praying that throughout Lent. And he gives some background, some helpful tips there, some things like that. So, and then each weekend we will be having some pieces on the readings for Lent, reruns of some things I've done, but also Douglas Bushman, a good friend of ours, wonderful catechist, is writing some original pieces for us that we'll run each weekend about each Sunday of Lent, and those are going to be very, very good. So Douglas is a really fantastic catechist. He's now back in, I almost said Minnesota, but he's in Wisconsin, right?
I thought he was in Minnesota.
Okay, Minnesota. Okay, I'm going back and forth on those two states.
Like
but
doing the West Coast thing, or like all those states in the middle are all the same, right?
Yeah, it's like people ask me to point out Ukraine or Wisconsin. I can't find them on a map either. One of them.
Well, being a Midwestern
Douglas,
boy, I can tell you there's a big difference between Wisconsin and Minnesota. So,
yeah. But Douglas was for many years at the Augustine Institute, and now he's running adult catechesis at a parish. And so those will be really great for Lent. I think it's good. You know, we try to run at Catholic World Report. We try to run a number of pieces on a kind of consistent basis on the spiritual life and on theological topics and so forth, because I think it's good to be really, you know, we need to be learning our faith more, and readers really respond positively to that. So that's another thing.
I'm going to interrupt you just for a second. Again, do a little inside baseball explanation for people that don't know designated hitter rule and all that. You talked about Liturgy of the Hours. What is that? Because a lot of people, again, a lot of ordinary Catholics, although the Second Vatican Council sort of encouraged more of an acquaintance with the Liturgy of the Hours, even among ordinary Catholics, a lot of ordinary Catholics go to Mass every Sunday, will not have any idea what you're talking about.
Well, I think maybe going back a few decades, the Divine Office or Liturgy of the Hours would be something that we would kind of see as something that the religious or the priests would do, right? But it's somebody who said the council really encouraged it, and this is basically the year-round prayer, daily prayer of the church. And you know, prior to internet technology, it'd be very, very expensive to find a set. It's usually about a 3 or 4 volume set of the Liturgy of the Hour books, and they can be rather expensive. But now there's a number of different apps and different ways you can do this through online resources, which is very helpful for people who don't have, you know, a huge budget for these kind of things. And also it's good with I think with some of the apps, and I'm not familiar with a lot of the apps, but they can help you get through, because it is kind of complicated. It's to get used to, you know, if you got certain prayers, you have certain readings, and so forth. And of course, there's some jumping around depending on the season and what's going on the church calendar. So that can be very helpful, because it can be kind of intimidating if you're not done it before, I think. So I know that there's some different apps and online resources for that. And I know that Ignatius Press published a book not too long ago about, I should know the title of that, but it was about how the Liturgy of the Hours really changed the life of the author. It was about 4 or 5. Is that ringing a bell, or am I totally?
Yes. Yeah, you caught me off guard.
In fact, we at Catholic World Report, I'm pretty sure we did an interview with the author.
It's a great book. I really enjoyed the book. It's been useful. It has to do with sacred time and liturgical seasons.
Sacred time, yeah. I'll call it up here while we're talking.
I'm drawing a blank. She did a great job.
Well, since Ignatius Press only publishes 1 or 2 books a year, I would think that
yeah. Well, and you caught me off guard, Carl. You know, we can look it up.
Oh, Numbering My Days.
Numbering My Days. That's it.
Yeah,
yeah. Had a clever title.
Yeah, that was great. And how the liturgical calendar rearranged my life. Is it pronounced Shane Heedy? Cheney Heedy? It's an interesting first name. Chene.
Yes, I believe so.
Anyway, I remember reading some of that when it came out, and I was really struck by how the author, the emphasis there is when you start praying the Liturgy of the Hours, it really makes you rethink how the calendar shape. I mean, we're so shaped, obviously, by a quote unquote secular calendar. So when you start following the calendar of the church, and I think, you know, all of us have to follow both, or try to, just because of reality and so forth, but jobs and so forth. But it really starts you know, it helps you to see things differently. it helps you focus. I think that's the thing about it. Something that Father Fox in his Catholic World Report article about this really talks about the focus, and then entering into the worship of the church, and how this is a way during Lent to maybe enter more deeply into worship. So yeah, very interesting piece.
I think Shane, I think he was speaking more broadly about the liturgical,
Right.
whole liturgical experience, liturgical year, the daily readings of Mass, various seasons and feasts of the church. But the idea is that we have this sacred order of time that is part of what it means to be a human being, because we live according to time as human beings. And that's not done away with, even though we think about, our incorporation in the life of Christ as participation in the divine life of the Trinity, and the Trinity is eternal and all of that. Nevertheless, there is a consecration of time, a setting apart of time, and orienting time and our use of time towards the eternal. So that really is the notion of liturgical time. And the liturgy of the hours punctuate the day with prayers, particular prayers, especially the Psalms and scripture readings and other prayers, to consecrate the day, to make the day be ordered to God. So I think it's great that that we're trying to utilize the Catholic World Report to convey that consecration of time in prayer. Right?
Yeah, I think it's an example of,
and people can get Numbering My Days at ignatius.com.
Yeah,
Sorry,
great book.
I forgot to title your book.
Great book. Yeah, I think it's helpful at a time when a lot of people are, I mean, all of us in different ways are looking for, I think, a way to engage kind of some of these treasures of the church that sometimes we don't access as much as we could, right? I mean, there's a lot of things. This is just one good example. So I was going to, Mark, shift. I was looking actually here at Catholic World Report, and I saw these two headlines. These are actually news briefs from Catholic News Agency. So one, it tells you the kind of world we live in right now. We got the German Catholic Bishops' Leader calls for a change to the Catechism on sexuality. And I saw that. I thought, haven't we seen this headline 4 or 5 times already this year? And then we have, below that, we have experts respond to President Biden. Biology and theology agree that human life begins at conception. And that, of course, is a response to the fact that on Ash Wednesday, after having received ashes, President Biden was asked by an EWTN correspondent about how he can reconcile his Catholic faith with his support of abortion. And the president, and I paraphrase this, something, I don't want to get into theology with you. And immediately there's a little bit of a furor on Twitter and other social media. I was among those who tossed my hat into the furor ring, saying, this is not about theology, right? I think and I think you said something, and Dr. Ed Peters and a number of others, and I think it's a point worth bringing up here. This has been a line that's been used for decades by those who say they're Catholic, but then support in various ways, sometimes very overtly in the way that they vote and pursue policy, support abortion. And, well, I'm not, theology is above my pay grade. I'm not getting into theology. And I think we need to emphasize, this is not about theology.
Right.
There are atheists who strongly denounce abortion, to their credit. And they do so because they recognize scientifically, commonsensically, etc., that it is the killing of an unborn human person. Right. So, that's a bit on that. And it frustrates me. It goes back to something kind of related during the March for Life events at the end of January, where I saw a number of pieces, and you made a remark about this too, people saying, well, if you're against abortion, then why aren't you out there helping, these single mothers, and why aren't you doing adoption and all this? And I'm thinking, well, people are. I mean, it's happening all the time. But that's what I call the Jimmy Carter argument. And dare I say,
why do you call it the Jimmy Carter argument?
Because it lacks all validity and substance.
Oh,
But further, no, but further, this is something that Jimmy Carter more than once in his various books, in all seriousness, he flatly states how upset and frustrated he is with people who say they're pro-life, but then as soon as the baby is born, they have no interest in taking care of the baby or helping the mother. And he says this, and I'm thinking, well, where have you been, Mr.
Right.
Carter? Where have you been? Do you not know about all these different crisis pregnancy centers? Do you not know about all the different adoptive families, a huge number of them Christians who go out of their way?
Which
You
is
know, my
not to
wife and
say that, you know, everybody who's pro-life
right.
is perfect about helping mothers after the children are born and so on. But the fact of the matter is there's an awful lot that the pro-life movement does to support both the child and the mother.
Yeah, and I think it may have been you, Mark, who made a point. I think it was on Facebook or Twitter about how, yeah, you know, the pro-life movement in America is a political movement. There is certainly a deep political aspect to it. We don't want to ignore that, but we need to look at different aspects and parse out certain things about the quote unquote pro-life movement. I was very influenced in my late teens by my then evangelical pastor. This was a number of years before I became Catholic, who, as a young pastor, he got thrown in jail 2 or 3 different times for protesting, not violently, but peacefully protesting in front of abortion clinics. He and his wife have 8 children. They have, you know, they walk the walk. They are great Christian examples of sacrifice, of so forth. You know, I look at, and then I also know of how over the years he has helped so many families in different situations. So, you know, what I see again and again is people say, well, if you're just pro-life and anti-abortion and you're not out there, and they give a list, you know, fighting climate change, helping the poor, social justice. It's like, okay, let's be realistic. How many people who have lives and jobs and families are going to be able to do all 27 of these things, right?
Right.
So, for example, I've never marched in a pro-life march, mostly because of where I live. Eugene, Oregon, believe it or not, is not a big hotbed for pro-life marches. Activism. We do have a lot of other events on the other end of the spectrum. I won't get into that, but you know, my point is that argument keeps coming up. Jimmy Carter he wasn't the first one, but he used it very strongly in a couple of his books, you know, written after his presidency. And it always really frustrated me because
I'm going to interrupt you just for a second because I'd like to make 2 points in this. One, many years ago when I was director of social ministries for the Diocese of San Diego, you know, I used to say that we dealt with every issue from abortion to xenophobia. And I know that xenophobia starts with an X, not a Z, but the idea was that it was a range of issues that we dealt with. And I remember dealing with issues of migrant concern and migrant ministry, and a lady who was very much involved with that at her parish, and she was part of our migrant ministry, migrant committee, migrant issues committee, and she's very pro-life as well. And she told me about a conversation she had with someone who was identified as a Catholic, was very supportive of migrant ministry, but was very critical of the pro-life movement. And for her, that didn't make sense. She said the same kind of, the same impetus of charity and desire for a rightly ordered society, which we call justice, that motivated her to defend the right to life for unborn children and to support their mothers, also led her to be concerned with migrants and people who were here trying to be part of this community and integrate into the community. And oftentimes it met with opposition. So for her, these things went together, and she sort of reversed the argument that you're describing, which is, well, if you're really what you say you are by being committed to pro-life, how come you're not doing these 15 other issues as well? She said, well, if you really say you're for the newcomer, then why aren't you welcoming the newcomer in the womb? And she said, I understand that not everybody can be activist about every issue of concern. We're going to prioritize. and we're going to focus according to our immediate experience and skill set and things that we feel God is calling us to do. But we should always have a wide vision for what it means to foster charity and justice in society. So she kind of put this guy on the spot, at least as she told the story. And I feel that way too. I mean, obviously there are all kinds of complexities on certain issues. You know, you can support in principle something, but have a disagreement about the means by which that's brought about. But on the issue of abortion, it's not just Catholic teaching that abortion is wrong, it's immoral. It's also Catholic teaching that it's a social injustice. That is to say, when you have laws or you have a government that is supposed to protect the right to life for every human being simply because they're human, and you have a government saying, no, we're not going to do that for unborn children, that's a social injustice. That's an inconsistency. And so a Catholic can't say, well, yeah, I'm personally opposed to abortion. I think it's a sin or it's wrong, or my theology tells me that it's a sin or wrong, or that it's sin and wrong. But I can't, as a matter of law and holding office, I can't uphold that conviction there, because Catholic teaching is that, no, this is a social justice, ethical matter. And so therefore, just as racism, obviously there's a theology that has to do with human beings being made in the image and likeness of God, and therefore racism is wrong. Okay. But we can't say, well, I'm going to not support racial equality in society because that comes from my theological motivation. And if you call me out on that, I'm going to say, well, let's not quibble about theology. I'm going to have to say, no, this is dealing with the public order. And as a human being first, I should recognize the racial equality. But I also have motivation as a follower of Jesus to work for racial equality in society. So I'd say that to Mr. Biden.
Yeah, and flip side, you mentioned the personally opposed approach. Why is abortion the only topic that can be used on?
That's right.
Why can't we use that on racism? Well, I'm personally opposed to racism, but I'm personally opposed to name any kind of real grievous evil. Right. But I am not going to force nobody says that, but they say it's used. Mario Cuomo, of course, is the famous example. Right. with abortion. We could go on that, but I think that there's this notion that it flows from some kind of esoteric theological system,
right?
As though prior, outside of Catholicism, no religious tradition or no philosophical tradition would uphold that the belief that the unborn child is actually a human person, etc. Right. And I think a lot of it just depends on a bias, a knee-jerk bias that certain people have against dogma or theology, like it's some kind of nasty thing, and also that it's just some kind of weird thing that this group believes, as opposed to recognizing that historically, the vast majority of cultures recognize that it's wrong to kill unborn children. But we, this can. Unfortunately, our president continues to mouth this. He continues to support it. He's an ardent supporter of it.
Yeah, that's why. I mean, I pray for President Biden. One of the things that's really horrible about this whole thing is, as I said, I think I've said this many times in social media, the most prominent Catholic layman in the world is militantly pro-abortion rights, and that's a scandal. Which is not to say there aren't other things that Biden is reflective of Catholic social teaching on, or at least you can make the argument that's a legitimate position flowing from a commitment to Catholic social teaching. Sure, there are those things, but there are also a lot of other things that he is at odds with Catholic social teaching on, and it's terrible that we have the most prominent politician in the world, who is also the most prominent Catholic layman in the world, and yet he's taking positions not on minor issues, but on grave social matters,
right,
fundamentally at odds with the Catholic vision of a just society.
Yeah, well said. as we've got a few more minutes here, Mark, I did want to kind of end on a little bit lighter note.
You get
And
Mark off preaching.
Well, I'm gonna bring up. I want to confess my ignorance to you and to those who are listening. I know you have you have dedicated years of your life to the comic book tradition.
Comic book tradition.
You know a great deal about a certain aspect of pop culture. It's funny, both you and I have different interests in terms of what we might generally call pop culture. But I think you saw Steve Gradanis wrote a really interesting piece for us on the new Batman movie, The Batman.
The Deacon Steve
And it's
Gradanis.
titled Caped. Yes, Deacon Stephen Gradanis. Is it Gradanis? Sorry. I want to get his name right. Sorry, Stephen. Who, of course, is, I think, we're one of the finest movie reviewers out there, regardless of being Catholic or non-Catholic. He's really excellent. Right. So this is titled Caped Crusaders and the Common Good. So it's really interesting. I learned a lot from it because, you know, I've never been a big, you know, superhero kind of, I don't have an animosity. It just was not my thing growing up. But
you grew up a fundy, and you probably weren't allowed to look at comic books.
Well, there's some truth to that. That's another episode. Wasn't allowed to read Chronicles of Narnia, although I ended up reading a lot of things that I'm sure would horrify my parents if they'd known. He talks about the roots of how Batman flowed out of Zorro, which I didn't know that. And then his focus here is, though, on what is the nature of the, you know, Zorro and Batman. When you look at the different, I mean, there's obviously been a lot of different movies, TV shows, books, comic books, etc. And Stephen's focus here is, you know, is this about a hero, a savior figure, or is this about somebody who inspires others? It's more of someone to emulate. And I thought it's a very interesting piece on that, because, you know, I know some people are kind of dismissive of pop culture in these terms, but I think he really nails something here that's worth pondering. Yeah. And also just kind of considering, you know, why the continued fascination with these kind of solitary, you know, heroes, superheroes, etc. So that you know, it's very interesting, kind of a little bit different piece. We do movie reviews, book reviews, obviously. I like to have some reviews of you know, popular movies at times, because I think it's good to show how we can, as Catholics, bring a Catholic sensibility, worldview, perspective, and look at, you know, the good, the bad, the ugly, however it is. So now I think there's some pop culture that's not worth wasting time on. Right. That can be a little bit subjective, but I think in this case, this is a very interesting approach.
Right. No, I think it's a very good article. It's more like a review essay, because he's dealing with things in addition to the new Batman movie, as you point out, and talking a little bit about the backstory to Batman and Zorro, but also that tension between the hero who does for and the hero who inspires others to do for themselves, and right. That's a challenge, and you're dealing with a heroic figure, because you know, I think about not just Batman, but in the original Superman movie, the Superman movie back in the 70s, you know, Superman's dad, played by his real dad, you know, Superman is his real dad, played by Marlon Brando.
Yes.
Tells, you know, the Superman that he's to inspire others, you know. He's to let his leadership is to inspire others, and not just simply to dominate and come in and bring about the right outcome. And you see a little bit of that in this discussion about Batman and the question of Zorro, and to what extent. And I was thinking about this the other day, because my wife and I were watching one of the Avengers movies, and people are going to come away thinking, you know, I'm a comic book obsessed guy. I'm not really. In fact, I saw, another Batman movie. Oh my goodness, we're going to do yet another Batman movie. But I was thinking about this, in there's a line in Nick Fury in the Avengers movie where he talks about the Avengers as being a team that was intended to fight the battles that we couldn't, and we being the non-superheroes, and there's that kind of savior mentality here. They're doing something we can't do. Obviously, extraordinary people, extraordinarily talented people, even just on a human level, are important because they can be brought in to help address extraordinary problems. But at the same time, there is that component where we should expect leaders to inspire others to do what they can, or even go beyond what they ordinarily would be able to do, and extend themselves to do much, much more. So it's interesting that you brought this article up, because I was just reading this again this morning. I read it yesterday. I was reading it again this morning, thinking about this tension in terms of types of heroes. And I think our Lord is a hero who fights the battle that we can't fight, which he did on the cross.
Yeah.
But at the same time, he's the hero who inspires, and not just inspires externally. We look at him and say, I want to be like him. That certainly is the case. But he also inspires internally by moving us along and inciting us to do what's right and to emulate him as disciples. So it's an interesting discussion.
Yeah, and I like the focus here on the common good, because this is something we've been hearing a lot about over the last couple of years, doing stuff. You got to do this or do that because of the common good. And I think, the essay takes that up a little bit about what is the nature of the common good. But I think it obviously applies to kind of the political situation, in that, what are we looking for in our political, cultural, social leaders? Are we looking for someone who's going to come in and just save the day and do the X, Y, and Z, or are we looking for someone who is going to lead in a different way? And I think that gets at the heart of some of the core challenges we have right now in our country. Obviously, we can't, dive into that here, but I think that a piece about a Batman movie and Zorro, does touch on that, and it makes you think a little bit about, what are we looking for? What kind of leadership do we desire? What really is the common good? How should we go about pursuing the common good, rightly understood, et cetera? So, yeah, I think that's a good change of pace a little bit from some. I mean, it's obviously there's some heavy issues there as well, but a little bit lighter in tone than some of the things we've already discussed here.
Well, Carl, on that note, we're going to take leave of our listenership here, but we encourage people to continue to read Catholic World Report. They can go to, I should know the web address. What's the web address? The web address is CatholicWorldReport.com, I believe.
Yeah.
Want them to go to CatholicWorldReport.com and read Ignatius Press's free online Catholic news journal. And people who would like to support Catholic World Report can go there and find out how to support it as well. Carl, thank you for talking to me today. I enjoyed the conversation. Look forward to having you back, and let's do this again.
Mark. It's always great. Thank you.